why did Moshe turn to Hashem at the end of the previous Parsha and cry out that the situation of the Jews in Egypt had only become worse after he and Aharon first went to Pharaoh to ask for their freedom? At this point, straw was no longer supplied, and yet they were still expected to meet the same daily brick quota, now using straw they had to gather on their own, which was an unbearable task even when the straw was provided to them. Hashem tells Moshe that he will see what he, Hashem, will do to Pharaoh, and how he, Hashem, will free the children of Israel. But Moshe had to endure a lot of patience, even though it was almost unbearable for him to watch the Jews suffer, knowing that every extra moment of slavery was hurting them and breaking his heart to see them in such pain. Some say that Moshe Rabbeinu's approach as a leader was shaped by the woman who cared for him. His mother Yocheved, who placed him in a waterproof basket in the Nile to protect him, Miriam, his sister, who watched over the basket, Pharaoh's daughter, who rescued and raised him, and Zipporah, his wife, who saved him from the serpent when they were in the hotel on the way back to Egypt. Because of their influence, Moshe developed a gentle and compassionate nature, deliberately shaped to prepare him for his role as a leader who values every individual and cannot bear to see any innocent person suffer. Crushed by their back-breaking labor, the Jews cried out to heaven for salvation. For the most part, they didn't realize that their oppression itself was planned and overseen by Hashem, and that when the appointed time arrives, they would be redeemed. In truth, the suffering in Egypt refined them physically, preparing them to receive the great spiritual revelation on Mount Sinai. In the same way, it's explained that the hatred and anti-Semitism we Jews experience these days also serve to prepare us for the unimaginable divine revelations of our future redemption. Among the many names of Hashem, Elohim represents judgment and severity, while the name Hashem signifies kindness and mercy. Likewise, Vayedaber, speak, implies harsh speech, whereas Vayomer, says, reflects a gentler tone. Accordingly, the opening verse of Parshas Vaera combines both qualities. Elohim spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem. The commentators explain that within the Jews' suffering, Hashem's kindness, the promise of ultimate redemption, was already present, though hidden. In applying this lesson to our daily lives, we can compare Hashem's way of handling the Jewish people to how parents raise their children. At times, parents make life challenging, causing temporary stress or discomfort, but they do so to instill values and healthy habits. In this way, children learn to set boundaries, develop their character, and grow into responsible adults who contribute to society while also achieve their personal fulfillment. When the Jews in Egypt saw that the water had turned into blood, they feared for the fate of their economy because they would sell the fish from the Nile to make a living. We know the importance of fish to the Jews from a later verse where they claimed, we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt. So when the fish died in the plague of blood, they feared that their livelihood had been damaged. But since the Nile, which was a source of water in Egypt, turned into blood, and the Jews had water, this plague to the Egyptians had actually benefited them because the Jews sold the water to the Egyptians and made a good profit from this plague. But not everyone recognized or trusted Hashem's involvement. Some even doubted his provision, as we see in the example of Datan and Aviram. We first meet them in Shemot, quarreling with each other. Later they became leaders of Korach's rebellion, and Rashi notes that they were the only two who disobeyed the command to refrain from leaving portions of the man from day to day. What does this tell us about them? This shows that they didn't trust Hashem to provide them for the next day, and that lack of faith fueled their fighting. Because when you think there's not enough, you compete, and everyone loses. But when you believe everything comes from Hashem, there is enough for everyone. From their mistakes, we learn to be content with what we have and trust that Hashem provides for everyone. Strengthening our faith can even open the door for Hashem to increase the blessings that we already have. Even the greatest believers, like Moshe, had to struggle with the tension between witnessing suffering and trusting in Hashem's plan. When the Jews were forced to work without straw, he cried out, Why have you brought harm to this nation?" So Hashem answered, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will send them away." This didn't mean immediate salvation, but it teaches us to be patient and trust in the timing of redemption. At the same time, it reminds us that our requests of those in power to help us should never be underestimated. There was once a man who approached the Rebbe and said that he needed a blessing for his sick daughter. The Rebbe answered, "Believe me, I don't even have a minute for you. I would love to help, but I'm busy." So the man answered, "I have 20 years to take care of my daughter, and the Rebbe can't dedicate a minute to bless her?" So as many Hasidic stories end, the Rebbe said, "So far, no one had taught me a lesson as well as this man did." And he blessed the man and his daughter. Beyond the examples we've already discussed, Parsha's Vaera shows that the Jews had opportunities to influence Hashem's plan by changing their own behavior. For example, some commentators explain that the Jews could have brought their own redemption quicker through their own actions. Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem, "How could Pharaoh listen to me when the children of Israel didn't?" The Torah says that the Jews didn't listen because of impatience and hard work. But that didn't explain why Pharaoh didn't fulfill Moshe's request, even after seeing Hashem's wonders. This shows that the Jews could have helped bring about their redemption sooner by keeping a strong, unwavering connection to Hashem, trusting Him completely, even as their situation got worse. According to this interpretation, their strengthened faith could have caused Hashem to force Pharaoh to obey their request earlier in a way that would hasten their redemption. This shows us that if we too truly believe that Hashem can help us out of our difficulties, this belief in itself can make a real difference. The well-known Holocaust psychologist Viktor Frankl testified to this. Those who felt that they still had a purpose or something to contribute in the world were much more likely to survive the Holocaust than those who focused only on immediate needs like making sure they had enough to eat. Statistics confirm that fewer of this second group survived. On the subject of faith and our ability to influence what happens, we can learn some important lessons from Moshe and Aharon. For example, what does the fact that Moshe stuttered teach us? Suppose you face a difficulty. Whom would you approach for help? Ordinarily, you would turn to someone skilled, well-connected, and persuasive. Yet when the Jews were in Egypt, Moshe Rabbeinu had such a bad stutter that he needed an intermediary to speak to Pharaoh. Still, it's specifically Moshe who is called the Redeemer of Israel. We never hear that Aharon received more credit for this simply because he could speak better. Moshe's limited rhetorical ability did not stop him from fulfilling his role. The lesson of this is clear. Regardless of natural limitations, when a person pushes himself beyond what seems to be possible, and he does this for the sake of Hashem and for others, Hashem will respond with help and outcomes that go above and beyond what he could have expected. Here is a contemporary example of someone who was able to bring about a direct intervention from above for another person simply through extreme self-control. It is told that the Rebbe of Shinava, who followed Kabbalistic practices, had built a mikveh in Tzfat and always made sure to be the first one to immerse himself each morning in that mikveh. One morning he arrived early and felt that someone else had already used the mikveh. When he asked those present who immersed in the mikveh before him, a man admitted that he had gone in first. This man was married for many years and didn't have any children, and he immersed as a schooler for having children. To everyone's surprise, instead of rebuking him, the Rebbe said emphatically, "Within a year, you will have a son." This prophecy was materialized, and at the child's bris, many referred to the baby as a miracle child. But the Rebbe explained to the guests, "I didn't perform a miracle. When I found out that someone had entered the mikveh before me, I was deeply angry. But I worked hard on myself to turn that anger into generosity. It was precisely because I overcame my initial reaction through immense inner struggle that Hashem fulfilled the wish and allowed this man to finally have his first child." And you might be surprised, but we can even learn important lessons about our own limitations and about the extent to which Hashem controls human actions from Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh thought, I am in charge, I control everything, even when Moshe and Aharon came with demands allegedly sent by Hashem. How did he justify this? Even after the first few plagues, when Egyptians warned him that Egypt was lost, he thought, if this people and their God are so powerful, they would have surely left Egypt without asking me for permission to do so. The fact that they came to ask shows I still have the advantage, so I won't let them go. It would be a shame to lose this huge workforce. What lesson about faith can we draw from this? We may think, I have skills, experience, and talents. I've worked hard and achieved results, so my success is up to me. But even Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of his time, had lost control. He was no longer the one deciding outcomes. This was true not only at the end when the Egyptians drowned in the Red Sea, but even earlier. Only Moshe, through prayer to Hashem, could end the plagues. The Jews were able to sacrifice the sheep, which were the Egyptian idols, without interference from the Egyptians. When Pharaoh lost his patience and told him to go then and there, at night, the Jews left with dignity during the day, not at night. Pharaoh found he could not determine what would happen to them. Likewise, we should not wait for harsh lessons to remind us that Hashem is the true ruler of our lives. We are only players in his court. I had a problem that bothered me a lot last week, and I heard me telling myself over and over again, you're not in charge. Hashem is the one who determines what will happen. Stay calm. And those thoughts actually helped me overcome the difficulty. Another way to overcome difficulties is to increase the good within ourselves and in our surroundings. Last week, as we got into a taxi, the driver told us about a commotion that had just occurred at the front of the building we had left. You're lucky you left when you did, he said. A few minutes earlier, there was shouting and beatings and a big racket. While he drove us, he shared a few other troubling incidents he had heard on the news. So I asked him, don't you think listening to a recorded class or participating in a Torah lesson might be better than keeping up with the news? He immediately agreed. Not only does Torah study bring peace to one's mind, but it also affects the world. The more words of Torah are spoken, the more benefit flows to everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike. It's true that current events can make you feel concerned or even scared, but we should remember that we can make a real difference through small acts of kindness among ourselves. Every positive action contributes to a vast collective force, tipping the balance towards good and outweighing negativity in the world. It's told of two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Shimon, struggling with his family's finances, went to ask his wealthy brother Reuven for help. When he arrived, Reuven treated him coldly, claiming he didn't know him or what he wanted. Seeing that his words had no effect, Shimon left in disappointment. After a while, Reuven paid a visit to his elderly father. When he got to his home, his father asked him, "Who is this?" So he answered, "Why, don't you know me? I'm Reuven, your son." "I don't know you," said the father. Reuven feared that his father may have become senile at his age, but soon enough his father explained, "Listen, I have another son, Shimon. If you're my son, then you're also his brother. But if you're not his brother and don't know him, I don't recognize you either as my son." Reuven understood the message and got in touch with his brother Shimon and gave him the help he had asked for. So one of the ways to merit special favors from above is to extend our assistance to those asking for help. And sometimes it doesn't have to be financial assistance. Rabbi Vaera related that he once went shopping and met a forlorn-looking person at the entrance of the supermarket. The man told him he would like some fish for Shabbat, but couldn't afford it. Seeing his distress, Rabbi Vaera told him kindly, "Wait here until I finish my shopping and I'll bring you some fish." The man's eyes lit up with hope, and he waited patiently as Rabbi Vaera went on to do his shopping. After finishing, he met the beggar at the entrance of the supermarket, gave him the fish, and advanced toward his car. When he got to his car, he thought to himself, "What did I just do? Granted, I gave him the fish he asked for, but I didn't even wish him Shabbat Shalom." so he walked back to the door where the beggar was still standing, shook his hand, and wished him a warm Shabbat Shalom. At that moment, the man's expression changed completely. His face radiated with joy, even more than when he had received the fish. Rabbi Vaera realized that the warmth and personal connection had brought the man far more happiness than the gift itself. When discussing remedies in the Gemara, in Ketuvot it is written that Rabbi Yochanan said, "It's better to whiten one's friend's teeth than to drink milk." And by whitening one's teeth, the intention is to make him smile. In connection with this, there's a story about a man who lived in the United States by the name of Moshe Yitzchak Fish. He had a strange habit of approaching people and telling them, "Give me a smile." While this was strange, people he approached usually responded with a smile. Once he came to the Rebbe of Satmar and asked him to give him a smile. And the Rebbe smiled and laughed, and later explained to those around him, "This man's demand is appropriate for his name, Moshe Yitzchak. Yitzchak is a word meaning laughter, and Moshe means pulling. Therefore, pulling smiles from people is appropriate for a person with this name." And at one occasion he recounted how he adopted this practice. Years ago, when he had lived in Europe, he once went to visit Reb Shaila of Kerestir to ask him for a blessing for his sick daughter who was critically ill. The Rebbe responded, "Give me a smile." "Is this all?" asked Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak. "That's all," said the Rebbe. "Now go home." When he got home, he was happy to see that his daughter was already feeling better, and eventually she regained her health completely. So out of his desire to spread goodness, from then on, Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak adopted this practice to ask people for a smile, to spread out goodness and joy. And maybe that's all we have to do, along with strengthening our faith, accepting Hashem's authority, and helping others. All we need to do is smile and make others smile, and hopefully we will soon realize the fulfillment of the verse. Then we will be filled with laughter, and our tongues will overflow with song, with the coming of the redemption speedily in our days.